Hello, students. Today we'll be working on writing equations that are quadratic in vertex form, which is what you learned about through the Desmos activity in the last lesson. So I wanted to do a quick review of what that form is. You'll see that, first of all, it is y equals, and then there's a number in front of the square term. And that a actually determines two things that happen to the parabola. The a, if it's positive, makes the parabola open up. And if it's negative, the parabola will open down. So up like this, down like this. If a is if a is a number bigger than 1, so 2, 3, 4, like that, then your graph is more narrow, as opposed to if your a is between 0 and 1. Now, those are going to be fractions like 1/3, 1/2, 1/5, those types of things. Then you have a wide parabola. And remember that that could be wide opening down or up. Same thing on the narrow. Could be narrow opening down or up. So you have the A, and then you have the H. The H is inside of a parentheses. So it's either going to be added or subtracted to the x term. And so if you subtract h, and this seems a little strange, but if you subtract h, the parabola will shift to the right. If you add h, the parabola shifts to the left. That's kind of opposite of what you think should happen. And I might just add, this will be important for today, that if there are no parentheses, then there's no shift. And so the graph would just sit right at 0 on the x-axis. So on your vertex would be 0 something, whatever's going on with the y. So if there's no parentheses, then the first part of your vertex is 0. And then finally, you have k, and that would be at the end of the equation. So this is the equation we've been looking at. For k, if you add a number at the end, so this would be after your square term, the graph will shift up. And if you have a k that's subtracted, then the graph will shift down. And if there's no number added or subtracted after your x squared or after your parentheses squared, then there's no shift. So no number added at the end, no shift. And that means that no matter what's going on with the x part of the vertex, then your y part would be 0. So I've been mentioning the vertex. Your vertex is coming from the equation, and you're always going to use the opposite sign of whatever is going on with h. So opposite sign of h. And for k, you use whatever sign is seen in the equation. So opposite sign of h, but the same sign of k. And if there is no parentheses, then you'd use a 0. If there's no number added after the square term, then you'd use a 0. So it's possible that your vertex could be 0, 0. So I thought we'd look at some review problems to get started. So you've got your chart to reference. as I look at these review problems, it's asking you to look at the equation to give the vertex and the axis of symmetry. So the vertex for this example, we want to use an ordered pair. Remember that the H is what's inside the parentheses, and the K is what's after the x squared, or what's after the parentheses. And so let me make that K a little bit better. All right. So you remember that on your H, you use the opposite sign. So I see a positive 1 in the parentheses. I'll make my K value -1. So my vertex is going to be -1, comma, and then my K value is going to be the sign that I have in the end of the problem. So -4. And then the axis of symmetry. Now, pay attention to on Math Excel, if it gives you the X already, then you don't need to put it again. But if it asks for you to type an equation, the axis of symmetry is X equals the X out of the vertex. So if the X equals is already there, just put the number. Otherwise, you'll need to put the equation. And then we have your second example. And so ordered pair for the vertex, your H is with the parentheses, the K is after the parentheses squared. So we use opposite sign for H. That's going to be a +4. And then we use the sign that the K has, so -5. And your axis of symmetry is X equals 4. You will be asked on Math Excel not only to answer these types of questions, but also to choose the graph. So I thought I would look at a Math Excel problem with you. So I'm going to bring that up and take a look at what that's going to look like. So here is my problem number 1, and I'm asked to give the vertex. So one thing I notice is I don't have anything added after the parentheses squared. That means the y value of my vertex is going to be a 0. So I'm going to put in parentheses because I have an ordered pair. My h, the first part of the vertex, I want to use the opposite sign that I see. So I'm going to use +1 and then comma. And then I have nothing added at the end. So I'll use a 0 to finish out the ordered pair. Now I'll check this answer. And then there's another part. It asks for the axis of symmetry, but the x equals is already there. So I won't need to type that in. I want to use the x that I had in the vertex. So that would be 1. I'll check that answer. I have one more question part left, and that is to choose the graph. Now, these are all going to be functions, so you can throw out any sideways graphs. We're not going to be looking at parabolas that are going sideways. So you can throw out any graphs that are going sideways. And then you just need to remember a couple of things. One would be if this is a positive number in front of the squaring, that means that the graph is going to open up. So since 5 is positive, our graph is going to open up. And that lets you throw out your third graph. And the only choice that makes sense for this is A. Also, its vertex is at 1, 0. We'll check that answer, and it is correct. And your second question is very similar to that, so I'm going to go on to the next part of these examples. So if you'll go back to looking at your notes again, This time we're going to go backwards. So this time I will describe a graph to you, or sometimes a graph will be shown to you, and you have to come up with the equation. So I just have a few things to help you organize the information that you have. One thing is you're going to need to know the vertex. So the vertex is -2, 7. And remember that the -2 is your H, and the 7 is your value of K. And then it's also, sorry about that, also telling you a little bit extra information in this. The A value is often hard to determine from the just looking at the graph. So in our problems that we're asking you about, the A value, excuse me, will somehow be given to you. So they want you to use an A of -3 and then to write your equation. Now your equation is going to be y equals, although I can't always say y, it might be f of x, and that part might already be in for you. So if it's f of x or if it's y equals, those are essentially the same thing. They have the same purpose. So if that's already there, you don't need to re-enter that. So just be aware of that. And then you'll have your A value. So whatever is given to you, in this case, it's -3. Then you're going to have your parentheses, and it's x. And then since our h was a -2, remember that we use the opposite sign. So we want to put in +2. And remember to square that. I would guess that this will be one thing that if you miss it, it might be because you forgot to put the exponent. So make sure that you put the exponent. And then whatever your K value is, you will use whatever sign. So I had a 7, and I'll put +7. And there's my equation of a graph that would have a vertex at -2, 7, and have -3, so that the shape would be down and narrow. So down because of this negative, narrow because it was a 3 as opposed to a fraction like 1/3. All right, so I wanted to show you another one. So you're given information. You have a vertex of 6, 3. And then remember that the 6 is the H and the 3 is the K. And then your A is given right here. A is 1/2. And so you're going to write your equation. Again, they may already have y equals, or they may already have f of x equals. You'll put the A, so 1/2. If it's a parentheses, or excuse me, if it's a fraction or some other weird kind of number, don't worry about it. Then you'll have x. Want to use the opposite sign of your h. So h was 6, so we want a -6, and we want to use whatever sign our k value had. So it was a +3, we'll put a +3. And so that graph has a vertex at 6, 3, with a shape that's controlled by the 1/2. So the 1/2 is going to make the graph open up because it's positive and be wide because it's the fraction 1/2. All right, so those problems will be what you'll see in your Math Excel assignment for problems 3 and 4 and 5. So just so you can kind of see the similarity, here's the A, here's your H and your K for your vertex. So on your work page, I will have you write down your vertex like I did in the notes. I'll have you write down the value of A. You'll find that given to you. This is one that already has the f of x equals. So I would just type in the 2, the parentheses, x, and I want to use the opposite sign of my x, so minus 2, close that parentheses. I've got to do my exponent. Remember, I told you that might be something you forget. So check that if it says you missed it. And then I've got a 1 that I need to add on to the end for the rest of my vertex. And this is using that vertex form that's at the top of your notes. So here's what you would be typing in. You're going to check your answer. And again, this is what problems 3, 4, and 5 are. Don't be worried about a problem like number 4 that's got kind of strange numbers for your vertex. Just here's the A value. Here's the H. You would use the opposite sign. Here's the K. You'd use whatever sign is there. So just work that one the exact same way as you see in your notes and as you would have done in problem 3. And then I'm going to go ahead and take you back to your notes. We have one last type of problem, maybe a little bit more difficult using some algebra, but not bad at all. So if you're given the vertex and another point, so this time they didn't give you A, you have to find it out. You can substitute these values into the vertex form, solve it for A, and then write your equation in vertex form. So I'm going to show you a couple of those. You'll be given your vertex. Now, you've got to remember we use these letters. So this is H, that first number. We always use the opposite sign. Your 2 is your K value. But your points on the parabola, we're going to use X and Y. So here's your equation. It's y equals a, and then x. And we've tried to leave it open, so I'm going to go ahead and put plus or minus h squared, and then plus or minus k, so that depending on the problem that you have, you'll know whether to use either the plus sign or the minus sign. So we have for our y value, so I'm going to look over here, what I labeled, I have a 9 for my y value. I just erased it. I'm going to put it back. So 9 equals, A is my one variable. In fact, I'm going to put it in a different color. I'll make it blue. This is my one variable that I don't have a number for. That's what I'm going to solve for. My x, I'm going to erase it so you can see it come back. So the x is the 4. Now, my h is negative 3. So I want to do the opposite of negative 3. So I want to put plus 3 and then parentheses squared. And then my k is a 2. And it's positive, so I'll add 2 at the end. Now that may look a little intimidating, but just look at it. It's not bad at all. So you have 9 equals, then you have your A, but look what this is. This is just adding 4 and 3 together. 4 plus 3 is 7. And so don't be intimidated by this. This is just 7 to the second power plus 2. All right, so 9 equals, all right, 7 to the second power, 7 times 7 is 49. A, the A is times the 49. We would typically write it after the 49 and then plus 2. So now you've got a really simple equation to solve. We're going to minus 2 on both sides of the equal sign. So that gives us 7 equals 49a. Those are going to cancel. Now, you do have to divide by 49, and that's going to cause you to have a fraction. So divide by 49 on both sides. And you can use Desmos if you need to reduce that fraction. 7 over 49. Please don't use a decimal. Please use a fraction, a simplified fraction. A is going to equal 1 over 7. That'll reduce to 1/7. Again, you can use Desmos if you need to reduce that fraction. So A is 1/7. Now, you did that because you have to type in the equation. So y equals, having a little trouble writing my letters here. Y equals 1/7, and then your parentheses, x, and then we had a plus 3 from our vertex. And remember to put your parentheses squared, and then you had a plus 2 from your vertex. And so this is the answer that you would type in. So you do have some algebra to do. This is going to be like problems 6, 7, 8, and 9. This is the answer that we are looking for, the equation. You have to do your work to find A. So I'm going to look at one more of these with you. And the problem is 4, 5 for your vertex, with your point on the parabola being -2, 7. So once again, we're using y equals a times the parentheses x plus or minus h squared, and then plus or minus the k. So your h for the parabola is the 4, and your k is the 5. Your point on the parabola, you have just an x for the -2 and a y for the -7. So we'll substitute in -7 equals, you have your unknown, your variable a, and then everything else we're going to substitute in. So x is -2. We want to use the opposite sign of h. So it was +4. We'll do -4, and then close that parentheses and put an exponent. Your k was a 5, and so we'll do +5. And then we just start simplifying. So we have -7 equals your variable a. In the parentheses, you've got -2 minus 4. That would be -6. You're going to raise that to the second power, and then have your +5. So that would be -7 equals, so I'm going to take -6 times -6. Be careful about your sign. That is +36. And then we have the a, and then +5. You can -5 to both sides of the equal sign. That gives you -12 equals 36a. And then again, you're going to divide by a bigger number, creating a fraction. And so the a turns out to be the fraction -1/3. 12 will go into 36 3 times. So your a is -1/3, and then you'll write your equation. pay attention to whether the problem already has y equals, or it could already have the f of x equals. Then you would just start with your negative 1/3, whatever your a value is. And then remember, we have x, your h was -4, and then you'll have that parentheses squared, and then your k value was +5. And so that's what we'll be looking for in problems 6 through 9. I'm going to quickly show you what that's going to look like on Math Excel. You will have to do work on your own paper, so make sure that you show that work. Here's problem number 6. Notice that this time the information is given to you in the graph. So you have in this one -2, 7, and then you have 0 and -13. So I had a place on your paper where you could write down your vertex. And if you're doing this on your own paper, just write it down. Here's your vertex, and then label it so that you know what's what. This is H, and this is K. So if you're doing this on your own paper, this is what you would write down. And then your other point is the 0 and the -13. And again, doing this on your own paper, write it down. So then you'll have, here's your equation. Again, I would encourage you to write this down, show this work on your own paper. So your y is -13 equals a, and then x, your h was a -2, so we'll use +2. Oh, sorry, your x, we know an x. X is 0, so 0 + 2 squared, and then our k value was a 7, so +7. So we'll have -13 equals a. A, remember, is your one variable. That's what you're trying to find. And your 0 + 2 is 2, and 2 to the second power is 4. So that would be 4a + 7. You can -7 to both sides. That's going to be -20 equals 4a. So here's one that didn't come out of fraction. So -20 equaling 4a, divide both sides by 4, and we get a equaling -5. So what I'll type into my answer box, now notice that the f of x equals is already there. So I'm going to start with my a value of -5, and then my parentheses, because remember, we want the equation, and then x, and my h was -2, so I have to use a +2 parentheses. I'm going to square that, so I've got to use that little tool. And then my k value was a +7. And whoops, make sure that that's not in the exponent. You guys are probably better at that than I am. So +7. Check your answer and move on to the next question. So you have problems 6, 7, 8, and 9 that are all like that. So good luck on your homework. If you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out to your teachers.